This is one of those videos where I tell you that everything you learned in high school about introductions and conclusions was wrong when it comes to college writing. In high school, you might have been taught that your introduction should summarize the body of your paper. Your body should develop those ideas further, and then your conclusion should summarize the body again. This basically means that in the course of a 3-page paper that you might have written in high school, you say the same thing 3 times. I firmly believe that your teachers had your best interests at heart when they taught you to write introductions and conclusions that way. However, I also think that they were giving you some guidelines that forced you to stay focused. And this is, of course, because they were teaching 15, 16, 17-year-old hormonally overactive kids to write 3-page papers. In college, we have a different set of expectations for what your introduction and your conclusion should do. And they definitely should not summarize the body of the paper, okay? So you want to eliminate from your mind the idea that everything you're going to talk about in your paper needs to be summarized in the introduction. That's just not the case. Your introduction should actually be much broader than the focus of the rest of your paper. So if you look at the diagram I've got on the board here, you'll notice that I have something shaped kind of like a very angular hourglass or perhaps a dumbbell or something of that nature. Your body is focused on your thesis. And your thesis, indeed, might summarize very succinctly the body of the paper. But the introduction should not. The introduction is much more general. In fact, you shouldn't have anywhere in the first sentence or 2 of your paper, of your introduction, the specific topic or angle of your paper. I would suggest that you don't actually get to the topic, the specific topic and angle of your paper until you get about halfway through your introduction. So for example, let's say you're writing a paper about the improvements in lithium-ion batteries for long-distance electric vehicle travel. You don't want to say in the first sentence, batteries are getting better and electric vehicles are becoming more viable for most car owners. That limits you immediately to your thesis. There's nothing to say after that in the introduction except getting directly to your thesis. It may even repeat your thesis, and you'll just have to jump right to the body of your paper. It would be better in a paper focused on lithium-ion battery technology and its impact on range anxiety, as they call it, with electric cars, to talk about innovations in automotive technology in general, or to talk about the environmental interests that have people interested in electric cars. So for example, I might say something like this. Few uses of petroleum are as unsustainable as our uses of gas for transportation purposes. For decades, car makers have been working on creating more energy efficient vehicles by increasing the miles per gallon that individual vehicles can go. Some of these vehicles have been electric vehicles, and electric vehicles are a great innovation. However, they have tended to come with certain kinds of limitations. We get to there. The limitations, the major limitations of electric vehicles include their short range before they need recharging. And new battery technology is eliminating this shortcoming, making electric vehicles more viable alternatives to gasoline vehicles. That would be your thesis. So you'll notice that I didn't even talk about cars until I got to right about here. And I didn't talk about electric cars and batteries until I got to about here. What I'm doing is I'm creating the broadest possible kind of introduction to generate as much interest in my topic as possible. And you might be thinking, well, you want specifics to generate interest. That can be true, but the broader the scope of what you bring in at the beginning, the more likely your audience is interested in some aspect of that. When you get into about midway through the paragraph or the introductory paragraph, you can start bringing in the specifics that will be the focus of your paper, and then your argument would go into the actual thesis. The conclusion functions the same way, but kind of in reverse. I often think that, you know, conclusions can be a little bit shorter too. I would recommend that your introduction be about minimum of a half of a page to 3/4 of a page. Conclusion can often be closer to a third of a page. I think most teachers see conclusions as less essential. That doesn't mean you won't fully develop your topic. The topic is fully developed in the body. But the introduction and the conclusion both spill out into a more general, start more general and narrow into the focus, and then spill out more generally into the context. What this does is this enables your reader to understand the context in which your thesis takes place, and it shows that you understand that context as well. So this might be the body, this might be background, and this might be your intro. We're basically looking at this same shape, but from the top, concentric circles. The most general is the introduction. Think about when you watch documentaries on television, right? Let's say you're watching a documentary about the history of the highway system, right, in the United States. They're not going to start by talking about the highway system. They're going to start by talking about cars. Maybe they'll start by talking about marvels of modern engineering like concrete dams, right? So the introduction for a documentary video on the interstate highway system is likely going to begin by saying man has for generations exceeded his previous accomplishments by creating ever newer systems of travel and energy, etc. Right? It's going to start really, really general, and then it's going to pull you into the interstate highway system as an example of that. You can even tell when the documentary video is about to end because they get general again, right? Maybe you've been talking about various things like the legislation that made it possible for the highway system to occur, the controversies over displacing neighborhoods that were in the way of the highway system, maybe even its use by the military. And then all of a sudden you can tell that it's 7:56 p.m. and the show is about to end, because what you get is, again, a branching out, a more general kind of comment. And the comment might be something like this. Innovations such as these continue to amaze the American people, and we are always looking for new ways of building bridges and enabling people to move where they move about the country. Whether it is shipping, trucking, air travel, etc., Americans are always on the move, right? That's the kind of conclusion you get here. So that's what I'd like you to think about as you work on your first paper, the research review. Make sure your introduction is general and that you don't get into any of the details. You don't want to talk about your sources yet. You don't want to get into any of the details in those sources. When we move on to the three-part proposal assignment, you'll want to think about the content of your introduction and conclusion even more carefully, because in the three-part proposal, we need to know what the content of these will be. And of course, in the research review, if you remember looking at the packet, the conclusion is actually kind of stipulated for you. It's just a series of questions in the first paper. Nonetheless, really think about your introductions. Make sure they start general. Do not mention your topic in the very first sentence. There's nowhere else to go, right? So think about the larger context in which your topic fits, and then bring your reader up to your focus. All right? Let me know if you have any questions.